So we were talking about German rearmament and their plans in terms of making Europe theirs. Hitler has been rearming the German military. He's moved forces in the Rhineland. He helps out the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War, unifies with Austria, and then leverages his situation to take part of Czechoslovakia, take the Sudetenland in the Munich crisis. And when that's complete, Hitler starts to eyeball Poland. Germany and Poland had some border disputes in recent years, and remember, part of Poland was carved out of Germany in World War I, and so they're going to look at Poland as their next target of acquisition. They claim that they're not looking for anything, but they really are, and this is just the next step in part of Hitler's plan. So he's preparing for war, and while he's doing that, he helps himself out to some extent, or he thinks he helps himself out by getting an agreement with his neighbors to the south, Italy. Uh, Germany and Italy form what's called the Rome-Berlin axis. It's an alliance of sorts. It's kind of a weaker alliance. Later on, they're going to strengthen that, but it's an agreement where they are in a firm friendship and alliance, and it's only going to get more of a strict alliance in terms of a military alliance later on. But people start looking at Rome and Berlin, the two capitals of Italy and Germany, and say, listen, their combined forces might cause a problem. Also, you have to understand, too, that Hitler, there's a reason that people tolerated him as the Fuhrer and doing some of the things that he does. Life inside of Germany is going to change dramatically, and there's going to be a lot of economic progress along the way. And of course, we're going to see a lot of the discrimination that takes place against Jews and other quote unquote undesirable peoples within that nation. So within Germany, life inside of Germany is going to change dramatically. Hitler wants to implement goals, including developing a master race, an Aryan race, this pure race of strong men. And to do that, he's going to have to change society. One of the things that the Nazis do is implement something called the Nuremberg Laws. You see a chart here, and this is obviously translated into English, but the German versions would go up all around the community, so you would know who you could and couldn't marry. Jews could not marry non-Jews, and non-Jews couldn't marry Jews. There'd be no intermixing of the races here, because they would produce children that would, according to the Germans, not be pure. And so ultimately, what they want to do is start encouraging their own eugenics program. In fact, Hitler looked at the United States eugenics program from the 20s and said they are actually onto something. So that's really bad when Hitler's looking up to you as a role model. But the Nuremberg Laws forbade intermarriage. It was illegal to technically even have sex with somebody who was a Jew. That could get you into some trouble and some prison time for that particular instance. And you see they've worked out what marriages would be prohibited and what ones would be allowed. And you could get certain special permission for a mixed type of marriage, but you can see that basically certain marriages are not going to be permitted if you're a Jew. And so this is where the discrimination starts. These occur in 1936. And Hitler and the Nazis are going to try to slowly implement this. And you have to realize that Hitler understood that you couldn't create the master race overnight. It was going to take generations of eugenics to do that. So the Nuremberg Laws prevented intermarriage. You couldn't have sex with a person who wasn't, or who was a Jew if you were a non-Jew, and vice versa. But also, Jews are required to wear this on all of their clothing, the Jewish Star of David. This right here would make Jews easily identifiable, and it makes them a target for persecution amongst regular individuals. It's a way of kind of marking them in a capacity so that regular Germans could say, these are the people that represent your problems. And it was not uncommon at all for people to yell or scream or say awful things to people in public, to bully them or physically assault them. Especially if you were a member of the Nazi Party and part of their groups like the SA or the SS, which we'll talk about later. And so many of the Jews start to see the writing on the wall, so to speak, and a lot of people start to flee. And so the Nazis are not at all sad about that. They think that this is a positive thing for Germany. And please remember that Germany doesn't have a high percentage of Jews. Okay, this represents the Jews are a scapegoat for Hitler and the Nazis. They look at them as somebody they can dump all their problems on. Hitler and the Nazis blame them for the Treaty of Versailles. They blame them for controlling banking institutions. They say they're an enemy of the German people, and along with communists, Jews are a plague on society. Okay? You're going to see also that the Jews are going to lose citizenship as part of these Nuremberg laws. That makes something really difficult for them to do, and that's vote. Voting means you get to choose who the officials are and what's going to happen in your country, and they lose that right to vote because they're no longer allowed to be citizens. And not only are they not allowed to be citizens, but if you were a Jew working a government job, you typically lost that job. The only exemptions were generally made for people who were Jews who were World War I veterans. That was the only people, and of course that was such a small minority anyway, it didn't really have an impact in the grand scheme of things. Now, the Jews also wanted to discriminate not just in terms against people, but in terms of ideas. What you see here was a common practice, book burnings. Ironically, it's going to be college students who start the concept of book burning. They wanted to get rid of, they'd been so thoroughly brainwashed, they wanted to get rid of any books that went against Nazi beliefs. And so they would organize on their own book burnings where anybody who said anything that was anti-Nazi, pro-communist, pro-Jewish, or any Jewish authors, they burned them. Incidentally, they didn't stop there. One of the books from the 1920s from Erich Remarque, All Quiet on the Western Front, talked about the horrors of World War I, and they were not thrilled about that book because it didn't glorify war. So it's not just a discrimination against people, but a discrimination against ideas. They're trying to get everybody to think in the same light. Okay. Now, something else that's interesting too, Germany had suffered in the 1920s economically because of the hyperinflation crisis, but in the 30s, they're affected by the Depression just like everybody else. And to solve that, Hitler, one, is going to put people to work in terms of the military buildup. They're going to offer, since they're rebuilding the military, they have people who need jobs. And so young men, they're like, this is your opportunity. This is your time to shine. Not only do you need soldiers, but you're going to need equipment for that. And factories were primed to build all sorts of things to assist their country. Think of this picture right here. What you see is a massive array of tanks and how much metal, how many pieces of ammunition you're going to need for this. You're going to need gunpowder. You're going to need all kinds of fuel for these. And so there's a lot of jobs connected to this particular industry of a military buildup. What you see right here is the christening of a new ship that it's in dry dock and it's being put out into the water. And you see people all around, and they're not just there to watch, but you see them all doing the Hitler salute, and they have Nazi flags. People are excited about this. They're back to work. They have a military and a country they feel like they can be proud of. And so you'll tolerate, or at least most people will tolerate, some negative things about society because now they have a job and they have something to look forward to. Not only that, but building projects. Hitler takes a page out of Franklin Roosevelt's playbook, and he is going to get his country in a lot of building projects, one of which you might have heard of, this highway system called the Autobahn. The Autobahn is a massive freeway that connects Germany, and it's easy for transportation. The speed limit in most places on the Autobahn, or at least a good portion of it, there is no speed limit, and you can drive freely without stop signs and stoplights. And this is a new thing for that time period. Hitler saw it as practical for moving the military around quickly, but it also has lots of economic applications. The transportation of goods and services, people, and not only that, but think of how long it's going to take to build the roads. Think of how long or how many resources of material. Just imagine the concrete and asphalt that has to go into this. Think of the paint, the metal that you're going to need for the rebar in the road. This is going to put people to work in Germany. They also build the Olympic Stadium and several other big projects, building projects throughout the 1930s. 1936, they hosted the Olympics, and they temporarily hide all the anti-Jewish signs everywhere in the community, and they stop the discrimination so that Berlin can host the 1936 games. And Hitler wants to show the world we're not such a bad place. Also, there were changes to employment practices. workers could no longer go on strike. Strikes were forbidden because you're hurting productivity and we need you working. Okay, not only that, able-bodied males had to work. Women, they regarded as important in a different capacity. Women were to be good moms, good housewives, and they could work certain jobs, but by and large, it was men who were there to do the work. And if you don't want to work, they had a place for you. It's what we call a concentration camp. The first concentration camps, one of the groups of people they housed were people who refused to go along with what the government wanted to do. So they started getting results with this. And if you look at the results, and you don't need to know these numbers, but the purple line shows you their gross national income is increasing every single year. And the change from one year to the next in terms of percentage, they're growing by 5 to 10% every single year from 1932 to 1938. Hitler is getting results. And so people have jobs, they can afford to take care of their family, so they will tolerate certain things or forms of discrimination against other people. And you have to remember, too, that not everybody who was in Germany was anti-Jewish or tolerated this or wanted to tolerate this, but they're too afraid to speak up for obvious reasons. Okay, so that's where we'll pick up next.